Welcome to Live Genre Chronicles, the newest era of our critical podcast about the diversity and development of Japanese RPGs. Every other month or so, we gather to discuss an RPG and its place in our understanding of the genre. I'm Val. That's right, critics don't die, as long as they have the will to fight.
I'm Becky. He who is from the land of the sun must also leave my bedroom if life to him is dear.
I'm Leroy, and I would also take an encroaching parallel universe into my body without telling anyone.
You would! Oh, that's terrible! Well, three very different jokes for a game with multiple very different tracks.
Yeah. This game is so much.
Yeah, and so I re-listened to the Wild Arms 1 episode last night. This is Wild Arms 2.
Deep Dead Genre Chronicles lore, our second ever episode was on this game.
Yep.
On the first game in this series.
Yeah, and it's a bad episode. You shouldn't listen to it. The editing is bad.
Right.
No, it's pretty awkward, and also Skype was giving us a lot of issues that we had to cut away from twice.
A lot of issues, yes.
But yeah, it's
Well, it certainly isn't the analysis we could do now with like an extra decade of experience and practice.
Yep, it sure is coming up on 9 years since we did our first episode.
Yeah.
But
so the thing that happened was we played Wild Arms 1, and I really didn't get on with it. And I think you two did.
No, I think we didn't get on with it, but we did like get through it with slightly less torn up feelings about it than you. And we were like, what the fuck is going on with this series? Why are people so fucking fond of it? What is the deal with Wild Arms? And then both of us were like, we got a question that was like, are you gonna come back to this series? And we were both like, yeah, you can go for another one.
Yeah, and then there was a running bit on the show of like, eventually you and Leroy were going to do, just the two of you were going to do a cast on Wild Arms 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you kept telling me wild ass shit about the game that I could not believe, because you were playing it pretty slowly alongside other things. And you never actually made the cast.
Yeah.
And
the thing
eventually
is, like,
I had to know.
Yeah, like I think we played it along like 3 or 4 months of the podcast back in the day. So we were contrasting this against like basically like, oh fuck, when was this? This is March 2016 that I have my screenshots from the first part of Wild Arms 2 on my original playthrough.
That's like when we were doing kind of Xenogears.
We were
Kingdom Hearts 2.
Yeah, like
FF Tactics kind of time.
Yeah, so we had just done Chrono Cross. It was Chrono Cross into, was it Chrono Cross into Xenogears? No, it was Paper Mario after that. And then
didn't quite do those two back to back.
Then Xenogears, and then like we were comparing to a lot of like other PS1 games. So that was kind of when that was going, and we were just like, hey, Wild Arms 2 though, it kind of fucks. Like, what? Why are we not talking about this game? And then we got to some of the localization bit. It was like, okay, I can see why we're not talking about this game more, but like no one's talking about this game except for like Symphogear freaks, and even then, like not a whole lot.
On that note, like Wild Arms 2 just recently got the PS5 re-release. I guess PS4, PS5 on the classics. And I was reading some modern reappraisals, and it was just getting slammed all over again.
Good lord.
People are saying it's just like a very generic Final Fantasy, very skippable, and I'm just like, okay.
What fucking planet are they living on? Huh? No fucking Final Fantasy would throw you into a Kamen Rider. Like, what are they talking about?
So I think Wild Arms 2 just doesn't have the Riz, so
I mean,
if you just play it for a little bit and no one like told you that it's good, you're like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, the opening of the game, I think particularly, because like the first game, the opening is where it leans heaviest into the Western stuff, and it doesn't lean super heavy into it because the game designers kind of didn't really know what they wanted from the Western elements.
To be clear, by the way, I think Becky is the person in this call still with the most knowledge of what the fuck a Western is. I've literally seen no Westerns. Like, all of my input on this is from, like, what tropes am I aware of from a great distance? Somehow that didn't come up at all in the original, but, like, I can look at this and go, this is Western aesthetic, but I don't know that it's doing anything deeper with that.
Yeah. Whereas I quite like Westerns. I have always been frustrated with games that are supposed to be Westerns, especially like Japanese games that are supposed to be Westerns, because they're not, which is understandable. But like the it does enough in the first game to kind of establish some of the mood. Things take a long time and everything's a frontier town and they have about the right vibe. Whereas the opening of Wild Arms 2 really doesn't have anything of that at all. You're just in a bunch of like, oh yeah, this is a classic fantasy RPG town.
Yeah, and like Eve says in chat, like 3 is a lot more like there are fucking cowboys. Like like one of the battle scenes, well, like you have horses that you ride around on the world map for one, but for another, when you're on the horses, you can still get into battles. And in Wild Arms 3, like they have entire battle scenes that are just like you're on a form of transport and you're fighting something that is keeping up with you as like a set dressing. And like you're on horseback just riding along and fighting like fucking wolves or bandits or whatever because they're fucking chasing you. And it's just like, this doesn't do anything mechanically, but it's so much more flavor, like Western flavor.
Man, we talked, which game was it? It might have been Breath of Fire 2, and it might actually have been a little bit Suikoden 2. This might have been one of the few things we liked about Suikoden 2, where just like reframing the battle scene a bit to bring in that bit of motion can be really, really effective. Maybe I'll play Wild Arms 3. That'd be a twist for 2025.
Yeah. Actually stock your bingo card with things you want to play and not complain about.
I played a bunch of things that I wanted to play. I still want to play more in Inazuma 11. I'm just complaining about my emulator cacking out.
Yeah, because you did a weird emulator instead of DS Moom because you were trying to fix it. You were trying to fix a font issue.
This is a huge tangent, and we don't need to get into it. So I can see, to get back to how we got onto that, I can see how people's response to Wild Arms 2 from a cold open now might they might not go far enough into the game to get any of the things that actually give it its character. Which is, as we have kind of foreshadowed, wild as fuck.
Yeah.
Those arms sure do be wilding.
Ashley shouting, "Nuke! Are you going to nuke people? What the fuck?" Which, this you cannot hug anyone with nuclear arms or wild arms. Like this. Let's not bury the lead here. This is a Kamen Rider game where there's also nuclear weapons.
Yep.
And for some reason, it's set in a Western setting series. Like, I don't understand what it's doing here.
I mean, there must be a Kamen Rider or some sort of Toku show where
absolutely there was. Like, I get, especially by now, but
the suit is like a Western themed suit. But yeah. So when we call this a Kamen Rider, what we mean is that the main hero transforms into a suited form and like powers up and does a bunch of cool shit. And like it doesn't have the kind of cheesy toyetic for kids vibe of actual Toku. And I say that with a great deal of affection now for like actual Toku shows.
Yeah, so for context, it's no longer just like, I think putting off talking about this game until I had actually engaged with some Toku content was a good idea, because Becky and I have both now watched Kamen Rider Build and most all of Dawn Brothers.
Yeah, and a few scattered bits of other shows as well.
Mostly the intros. Yeah, the first episodes. But like, those shows are made to sell toys. But,
to a specific kind of young child as well.
Yes. But like, with Kamen Rider Build in particular, I felt like Dawn Brothers is very good, but also it doesn't really have a lot of the gravitas a lot of the time that Build ended up going for. And I feel like it was a very illuminating thing to have. Okay, Kamen Rider Build is going to tell a serious story about a man from space trying to take over the world and splitting up the country into 3 like warring states. And also, this man has his fidget toys and he's going to turn into a superhero.
Yeah. And I think Eve makes a good point that like Kamen Rider specifically, there's always that little, or there's often that little element of darkness in the suit and the origin of the suit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's really important for considering the Wild Arms 2 suit, the Lord Blazer stuff.
Yeah. So specifically while playing this, I realized that Bonjo Ryuga from Kamen Rider Build, who is also a man who is trying to save his girlfriend at the start, is also like connected to the spaceman who wants to fucking take over the world. And essentially all of the people in Kamen Rider who have their like transformations have part of that like extraterrestrial influence in them for one reason or another. And it's this is all tangential to the point that we were kind of thrusting at, which is like the ideas that Kamen Rider is going for, even if it is all to sell toys, and most of it is to sell toys, you can still repurpose those ideas and put them into a context where toys aren't really the main thrust of things, and it can still make a compelling like character arc.
Yeah. The business model is to sell toys. That doesn't mean that the story is exclusively limited to trying to sell you toys.
Yeah.
And Kamen Rider Build is different from something like the original Gundam, where the original Gundam kind of stumbled into being a toyetic series, and the feedback loop from once it started selling toys, the business imperative to sell more toys really shaped the show. Mm-hmm. Whereas Build, clearly, they went into it knowing that they were making a show whose business model was selling toys and doing a bunch of stuff to continually supply new toys to sell. But the story is the story regardless. I think Dawn Brothers is a bit different because it's also like an anniversary show.
Yeah.
And it's got a kind of...
it's also a Sentai...
it's Sentai rather than Kamen Rider, but it's got this kind of omnibus effect where lots of the suits are references to suits from previous Sentai series.
And it follows a series where that was also the case with Zenkaiger.
Yeah.
Because it's set in the same universe. But I was also going to say that, like... Fuck, what was I going to say? Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, it's lost. I don't know where it went. Fuck, that's annoying.
Yeah, anyway, so part of this story is a Toku show. And specifically, I think, kind of Kamen Rider-ish. Because there is an element of it building to a confrontation between Ashley and Lord Blazer, which is the source of his Night Blazer transformation power. But there's so much else that's going on. A lot of which is more kind of conventionally PS1/2 Japanese RPG storytelling stuff. But
I think the best way to look at how the story constructs itself is there are six main characters. I'm going to discard the secret character because she's kind of not relevant to the plot entirely, and bring in Irving instead as the sixth main character. So there's Ashley Winchester, whose plot is about doing his job as an arms member to justify the power he's gotten as Lord Blazer's vessel and becoming Night Blazer. There's Brad, who is in arms because he's under, like, he has a fucking explosive collar on him called a Gias, like code Gias, to bind him to his, and like the word Gias, to bind him to doing right by the arms organization as penance for his participation in and failure to participation in a revolution and failure to keep the leader of the new terrorist organization, or Odessa, like, from starting said terrorist organization and not taking responsibility for all that. There's the story of Lilka, who is a crest sorceress who wants to just get better at magic because she has been the underdog at her school for trying to chase after her sister's dreams.
Yeah, basically she's overshadowed by her sister, who was like really, really talented, and
is dead.
Died? Yeah.
Is dead.
And so people want Lilka to... people put a lot of pressure on Lilka, one way or another, to either be as good as her sister or to stop trying to be as good as her sister. She's got a real complex about it.
Yeah. Those are the three you start out with, and then you eventually pick up Tim, whose name is Tim Rhymeless, which is a really good name, whose story is about it's about his place as a pillar, which is like the sacrificial lamb kind of deal that can commune with the guardians of Filgaia, the setting, and interact with them to like sort out elemental stuff. They're kind of like the seed seers in 14, like Kane Senna, where like they're very important, but also like they're probably they're not going to do well if they're not supported well. And then there's Canon, who is basically from a branch family of the hero's descendants, who believes that she has the right to become the hero and kill the demon that is living in Ashley, and later joins arms so that she can keep an eye on Ashley and make sure that she can kill him if he turns, because he's always like battling against the dark powers that live inside him. And those are the 5 like playable characters, and then there's Irving, who like brings them all together, whose entire thing is that he knows that a cosmic threat is coming, and he is engineering a shit ton of political situations that he can interject into with arms to gain political power and then unite the planet against the cosmic threat, and then ends up also using his sister as a tool to help defeat the Kuiper Belt, which is sure.
Yeah, so among other things, this is an apocalypse story.
Yeah.
And the apocalypse is... I mean, they got the term Kuiper Belt from somewhere. It's not being used correctly.
Yep.
But it is a parallel universe that is intruding on our universe, or on their universe, the universe the heroes are from, and is going to destroy it. Which is a cool premise, which is also part of the premise of a story that I wrote which has been much mocked for its title on this podcast in the past.
Yeah, that is a lot of terms of Wild Arms. It got it from somewhere. It's not as bad as Wild Arms 1 in some ways, where it's just like, oh, we took this loan word and then we mistranslated it back, and we got Holmcross from homunculus, or Belzelk from Berserk. Like, very, very funny. But yeah, like, thinking about, like, the plot is largely, like, a collection of beats for each character's through line to react to, more than it is like a really dense narrative. Like, a lot of things happen, but they're mostly just there to, like, give characters things to bounce off of.
Yeah, it's got that's kind of a vestige of the kind of older Dragon Quest-y episodic format, right? That we talked about a lot with Dragon Quest and also with Breath of Fire 2, of like, you go to a town, you do the thing in the town, the characters have a set of reactions to it that slowly start to play out a longer form and more and subtler kind of story.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something that's probably going to cause some psychic pain.
Probably, go on.
Because of the way that you're basically an extra military force being dispatched to all of these missions, it's a little Mass Effect-y.
You could say it's a little Mass Effect-y. You could also say that it is pulling from the same kind of from the same roots as Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that, like, you know, Mass Effect's fundamental problem is that it really wants you to be a good space cop and think that the concept of a good space cop makes sense.
Yeah, which is not the case here. Because...
in this, it's so much more abstract about what you're doing. It's kind of more, it isn't really aesthetically you're a space cop, and it isn't interested in, like, Mass Effect wants to have like mature and sophisticated solutions to, like, racial issues as they relate to policing. And its problem is it doesn't have any maturity to apply to those problems. This doesn't have that aspiration to like tackle kind of thought experimenty real world moral logic dilemmas.
Yeah, no, it is very much a playing with the idea of getting to be like, it's it's very much playing with the idea of, like, what if you were a cool group of people who went out and did things for special, like, it's Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, and the original Mission Impossible, and as Eve points out, again, episodicity.
Some Common Writers,
yeah. Anytime you've got like, you're doing stuff for a central authority.
We have been talking. I don't think I've heard Leroy's voice after they introduced themselves. Are we? Have you anything to say?
No, not anymore. I lost the thread. Sorry.
Also things that are Kamen Rider inspirations. All of the bosses that are not humanoids are just like weird toku monsters, and it's great.
Also, like, just generally, the monster design in this game fucking rules. There are so many unique, weird, fucked up monster designs in this. It's not quite Shadow Hearts tier, but there's so much variety. Like, there's an island in the inland sea that's got a couple of side quest checks on it. But also you can go there, and it's got basically every mid-game enemy can spawn there, I think. And I like, one of the first enemies that I fought there, one of the first encounters I fought there, dropped a lucky card, and I was like, this might be a good place to grind lucky cards. That will make the rest of the game easier. And I did like 2 hours of grinding there, and I don't think I saw any encounter more than about 3 times. Because there are just so many different models and encounters, and it's not even like they're they're recombining encounters in lots of different ways. It's just that many models. It's wild. I don't think I saw much in the way of like reskins or recolors either.
There are a couple, but they're very few and far between. Like there's a like optional dungeon where you can go to get the Evil Dead and the Reanimator enemies. Once again, localization team, I don't know what your game is. So there are a couple enemies. So there's a dungeon that you can do optionally that is like the good luck zone, which sounds ominous, but it really is just all about luck. And the only encounters in the first room, which leads to 2 locked doors, the only encounters are encounters with this enemy that has a key in their hand, and you have to pickpocket them. So you steal the key out of their hand, and you get an item called Secret Key, and it opens all the doors except for the last one in the dungeon. There's a reskin of that enemy near the Meteor Crater Island. Or on the Meteor Crater Island. That is that same thing, but you can steal duplicators off them. Because they're magic keys.
Yeah.
So they were just like, let's reuse this bit. This is fun. Which is also funny because there's a big bad guy with a giant key enemy. Like,
yeah, one of the bosses
kind of has a key, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of is also weird because they got transed in the localization to make things less gay. Or they didn't realize that they were gay, which I would also buy.
Wait, what?
Kaino was male in the original, and Kaino was the one.
It's kind of the one who's like
Vince Feld's concubine, yeah, like
Kaina kidnaps Marina.
What's
the big key? Right.
I don't think Kaina is the one who.
No, that's Antonora.
Yeah,
I'm getting them mixed up, but yeah, no, Kaina is male in the original and female here? Question mark? Or was it Antonora? There is a transed character.
Kaina's the one. Kaina got gender swapped in the localization.
Huh.
For no fucking reason. Like
I did pass them as like the most queer coded of the villains. But
paraphrase of a friend, they censored trans people only to let the guys fuck. Because the Japanese script is it's hard to read that subtext into Brad and Billy in the original script, but it just feels like instant immediate in the localization.
Yeah, the scene with Brad and Billy is just like, oh, this is gay as hell. Good for them. These bitches gay. Yeah, no, it's this localization is a fucking mess.
Yeah.
To a degree that is kind of obstructive to like parsing some of it.
It makes it feel like hard going, I found. Like the game does a lot of things that I really like it when RPGs do, in terms of the pace, the kind of size of the dungeons, the speed of the combat, how your kind of basic combat strategies work. It was like the combat and the dungeons were very comfortable, but trying to follow the story and like parse the language out and figure out, because it has a conceptually very cool world map mechanic where places that you need to go to aren't visible on the map until you've gone there and scanned the immediate area to like make them pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to follow actual in-game directions.
Yep.
Which is cool, to be clear. Like the core idea there is great. The localization is not always clear.
I
And
mean, it tends to be pretty clear when it's actual direct instructions on where to go from one zone to another. But if it's general area, it's just like, okay, this is not super useful.
Yeah.
The localization will like literally tell you like go somewhere, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. But you know, in terms of following the story and following some of the more subtle aspects of the story, it felt like you know, I struggled to parse it in the way that I struggle when I try to read like 19th century literature or Shakespeare or something. It's like, yes, I can more or less follow what's going on, but it's a lot of effort to get the kind of nuance out of it. And so despite the fact that I enjoyed the game, I found it quite difficult to like sit down to.
I really feel that because I've played this game twice, and when I was replaying it, I mean, I think much like a foreign language or Shakespearean language, when you go through it twice, you're like, oh, I can like understand it this time. But
it's
when
also
I
been
look,
8 years since you played it.
true. But still, when I look back on it, so I have a strong associative memory where I won't remember anything, but once I start doing it, I start to remember. I'll remember
Mm-hmm.
things pretty vividly. Wild Arms 2, I couldn't remember jack shit. And I mean, just like my old memories, they feel like it was like water on a rubber chicken. Like it's a really dense text, but not in the way that feels rewarding to read. It feels like you're puzzling out the intention behind the words.
I think it's also because some of the plot turns are so wild. Like if you try to reconstruct the logical sequence of the story, that's really hard because it's a bunch of different things kind of popping up all over the place.
Yeah, for the record, I feel like I had a vaguely rough time understanding it the first time around, but also I have experience with reading really poorly translated visual novels, so I don't have the issue of like actually parsing. Like, I have joked about how sometimes I will feel like I am reaching through the bad localization and grabbing onto something from the original Japanese and pulling it through to explain to someone. And this has a lot of that. But
we should make clear too, because like bad localization is such a weaponized expression these days. This is not we think they ruined it. This is or like they kind of compromised some original artistic vision. This is we think the localized work just is difficult to get to grips with because not enough thought was given to actual English intelligibility.
They created a dialect of English that does not exist.
It reminded me a bit actually. So this is an even deeper pull for DGC lore. The Vextro podcast that Leroy and their buddy Max used to do when you covered Pathologic.
Oh yeah.
Like because Pathologic has an original localization that was machine translated and pretty bad. And then it had a retranslation that was actually a commercial retranslation, which is now the recommended way to play it. And there was a question on that cast that was like, compare the two. What's the difference? Is it like how much better is the new localization? And I think it was Leroy. You said that there was something about the old localization because the language was so weird and the game is so extraordinary. There was a tonal resonance there, even though it made it very difficult to follow what was going on. And there is something compelling about how difficult the language is in this sometimes. You know, there are occasional really great lines. But I don't think it's as successful at working with that as the original Pathologic localization sounds like it might have been.
Yeah, definitely not. Me and Max were saying it is clear for so long after that. We were just saying at each other, it is clear. But I think with Wilder, well, first of all, I'd rather this game just be more accessible because it's like a pop culture genre clusterfuck. It's not like reaching all the way into into like I don't know the legacy of Western philosophy or whatever, like pathologic. It should be kind of like a more neutral field where everyone can enjoy it. So this localization kind of sucks.
It feels like this one needs to be that it would pop so much more if it just had the energy of a toku show, which is very emotionally expressive, very straightforward. The language is aimed at children, so it's simpler. And toku shows prove that you can do emotionally deep storytelling in that kind of tier of language, in that what's the word? Not really dialect, but that style.
Like Battle Network, we just played that. I mean, that one could have still been punched up, but it had that kind of just.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
it's really direct.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like Golden Sun a bit as well. Is another one that comes to mind, and some of the Pokemon games maybe.
Yeah. I think my brain just works differently than y'all's when it comes to like the way I'm handling this translation, because like I don't know, there's something like I can feel the vibe of what was like being translated, even if the word choice is garbage, because like I'm just kind of like, okay, this sentence has a bunch of like it's hard to explain. I feel like more than like the word choice they actually chose, I feel like I end up feeling all the word choices they didn't choose and feel like the vibe out from that, because and I just do that when I'm reading things that are not in their native language.
Yeah, I think you're very good at that. Like, I think it's a skill that you have, and I can do it sometimes, but not very often.
Here's another anecdote. When I first played the game, I thought Odessa was cool as fuck, and I thought they were actually the good guys, and we were like having this like gray conflict. And when I replayed it, I realized they're fascist, and I don't know what the fuck I was reading or thinking before.
Because like, if you're like, okay, they're a terrorist group, either there's going to be a twist where they were actually the good guys, or they're just like actually awful people, and it feels like
also like,
and maybe that first impression was stronger than the realization that they were like actually terrorists trying to kill everyone.
I mean, Irving also makes a bad first impression because one of the first things he does is put a fucking bomb collar on one of the characters.
Yeah.
For no well-explained reason at all. It's like, this is a bit wild, my dude.
I mean, it is a good explained reason, because he's a fucking war criminal, and he doesn't believe that he'll follow orders if he doesn't have a gun aimed at him.
Well, this is also a game where like stuff that happens in the first act will become you will understand it like 30 hours later, and I think the stuff with Irving is one of those. But
I mean, there's a pretty big reveal right at the end about Irving's approach.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess that tracks. I was not. I mean, the Irving reveal. I've played so many RPGs where a reveal like that does come out of nowhere that I almost reflexively went, oh, this came out of nowhere. But then you look back on it, it's like, no, Irving's sinister as fuck the whole game.
Irving's sinister.
So to clear. Oh wait, what do you want to say?
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, he's sinister as fuck the whole game. He has like a bad attitude. They're constant. Like, they specifically bring up like the Odessa probably only exists and causes problems when you're around because they know where you're going to be, so you probably have a mole. Like that thread does kind of exist throughout the entire game.
Yeah, this time I was definitely paying attention more than the first time, and I was able to read the text a lot better. I don't know, I guess I leveled up in some ways. And something that I was sitting on and just had me confused the whole game because I never got to the end of the second disc when I played it the first time. Was that Irving was there with Kaina during the demon summoning, in which where Ashley gets the fucking demon in him, and Irving was there, and then I'm just like, they never why I'm just sitting there like over and over again. It kept coming up for me like, why was Irving there? What was he doing there? Why was he with Kaina? Why were they familiar with each other? Why was Kaina like, oh, I'm working for you, Irving? I'm like, I don't get this. There's something not connecting. And then you go, you get through the whole entire game, and they connected. Like Irving was collaborating with Odessa the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of scattered like, oh, Odessa has a bunch of nobles funding, like you have a mole inside your thing.
Yeah.
They keep getting around before you do, and you have to like, and it's really like probably the most obvious early one is when you get to Silvaland, and we're just like, hey, can arms work with the Silvaland government? And then the queen's like, or the king's, I guess it is a queen. The queen's like, no, we don't have any need for like a military squad just running around our borders. I don't really buy into that. And then there's like fucking, my lady, Odessa is attacking. My lady, we are under fucking attack. And then she's like, well, that's convenient. Go deal with that.
Yeah. It's the sort of moment where like, you know, the Saturday morning cartoon or toku background is like, well, yeah, of course, when the heroes go to a new place, it's immediately attacked by the bad guys. That's how TV shows work. But also, when you put it in context in the through line, it's like, oh, wait, yeah, obviously there's more going on here.
They bamboozled us.
They bamboozled us.
There's also the relief. Oh, I cut you off.
I was just going to say that, like, again, for me, this was a casualty of the localization because I could never be sure that I wasn't misunderstanding what was being said. And because the localization made it hard to get through story sections, I just slacked on playing the game for a while. So I went through these episodes, the Demon Summoning and Silverland and so on, quite separate from one another. Like I'd have a burst of playing it for a few days and then get busy,
and then you just spaced.
Yeah,
because you're not great at recalling stuff.
It does go from like chapter to chapter in such a way that I was not expecting stuff to come back. So like you do the Millennium Puzzle with Lilka, and this is a very interesting way to establish your character where the Millennium Puzzle, I still don't really know what it is. It's some way to contact or connect with other dimensions. And it seems to be implied by NPCs that Lilka's sister basically died inside the Millennium Puzzle. She couldn't do it right. She failed the summoning, and then I don't know what happened. I guess it doesn't fully explain what happened to her. And Lilka can't do it, and she doesn't ever push as far as her sister either. When she tries to put, she gets to a point where she could push as far as her sister, and she doesn't. She instead chooses to leave, which is understandable because she's traumatized. But the Millennium Puzzle comes back again as a way to kind of like finally establish or like really like punch in Lilka's affection for Ashley when she finishes the ritual in order to contact Ashley. And then the game is so mean, and it didn't matter that she did it or not. But that's the kind of thing I like when you do the Millennium Puzzle and act in like the very beginning of the game. I didn't really expect it to reprise.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on there, except like I thought the Millennium Puzzle.
The first time I played, I had no fucking idea either.
I thought the Millennium Puzzle was like, it's the exam that all Crest sorceresses have to take or something. I think was the impression I got.
And that's a fair impression because that's what it seems like it is until it comes up again, and then they actually tell you what it is at the very end.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Which like that's what this game does. It throws you at a bunch of different episodes of things that just happen, and you have presumptions about them, and that are mostly glossed over by the context that they're in, and then it just like turns you around, and it's just like, oh, I've been walking down this path full of like really episodic things that all have really specific meanings to the characters that were involved in them that I was just not picking up on. Which, in a game with a more competent localization with room for nuance, would have landed a lot better.
Here's a Toku thought. Toku episodes start with a like previously on whatever. I think this maybe needed something like that.
Hun,
and of course
that's
you can't.
You just need reminders and like.
No, I not just the reminders, but because when you summarize stuff to that kind of pace, where you've got to get through it all in 30 seconds, you just have to spell it out.
I don't agree that would work though. That wouldn't like. I don't think that would work in this game.
I don't think you can put that in a video game.
There's a minute pass here.
Sorry,
like mangaka. Well, I was just gonna say mangaka are good at like. They don't do the word for word summary like an American comic book, but they will, like in the new chapter, they will draw it in such a way that it establishes the context for a new reader. Like you picked up Jump and you can like get into it and kind of understand what's going on. They're more conscious of that. In a video game, you don't have to be conscious of that. But theoretically, you could be. I just don't know what it would look like.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, when you're making a game, you're presuming that someone is going to play it from start to finish. They're not going to like pick up in the middle, like, and trying to design around that is going to be a design nightmare.
I honestly think like the call and response that Wild Arms 2 does is actually not very common either. Not even on RPGs. Usually, it's like. The themes will keep reprising, right? But like events that happen at like 10 minutes into the game usually aren't going to be directly referenced like 50 hours in or 40 hours in, depending on how long you take.
Mm-hmm.
So that part also kind of, it's interesting. I think it's very interesting, but it's also like non-standard in some ways.
Yeah, no, like I fully accept and understand that like the way this game does this is like uniquely wild. But like I think that kind of echo of like things that you didn't really think through is a really good. I wish more games were capable of toying with that idea, but I don't know that I think a whole lot of writers would be confident in their ability to do that. And the fact that they fucking pitched and swung for the fucking fences on this game of all games is wild. And I really wish the localization could keep up. And I really hope that retranslation goes well.
Yeah, a retranslation of this would be good.
It's in progress, as Dahl mentioned. Someone is working on a localization, hoping to have it done this year. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I'm fond enough of this game that I'm like, I really want to make a competent fucking guide for this game, because you have to use like 3 or 4 different guides to get all the info on the fucking things that you need if you want to like 100% this game or like handle a lot of things. Like the best one, last updated in 2008, God bless Shotgun Nova. They made a lot of good FAQs. I don't know if they're still doing that anymore, but you know, yeah, there's just some straight up wrong things in there. Like, oh, this boss uses a move called Mirror Coat. It will only like, it'll cast Mirror Coat on its head, so you can't use magic on the head. It'll just lie to you like that because it will Mirror Coat both parts of the boss.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't have much in the way of problems with the guide I used, but I also didn't use a guide very much, and I think I should have used a guide a lot more.
Yes.
You also
tried to like critical path it a little too hard at the end to just get through it, and this bit you in the ass a little bit.
Yeah, well, it did a thing that is a classic RPG thing of, there's a stage of the final boss where you have to split some party members off and they have to fight things on their own. And I'm not against that. I wish the game had done more of it earlier on.
Yeah, like if they foreshadowed that being a thing that you had to do more often, I would wholeheartedly go like, okay, well, this is just a thing it warned me about. It didn't know.
It really comes out of nowhere because before that fight, my Mirabelle was like taking 0 damage from everything, and I'm just like, oh, ho, ho, ho. Yeah. And then I send her into the boss fight, and she's taking 1,800 damage, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think I wanted more. Final Fantasy is usually really good at this. Like, it starts escalating toward the end, so you get ready for the hardest non-optional fight, and Wild Arms 2 kind of drops the ball where it's just like, the difficulty is very flat, and then at the end it's like, oh, but this is what we've been balancing the whole game for, just this one fight.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Final Fantasy, because when we did Final Fantasy 13, we had a conversation on that about the fact that the game doesn't force you to play it well, and you can end up getting stuck in a rut of like functional but unfun and very time-consuming strategies. The famous problem with the diversity paradigm. And I feel like Wild Arms has a bit that problem too, because there are some fights towards the end where you actually really have to think about your resources and your toolkit and so on. But most of the game is so easy that you can do very basic core stuff the whole way through. Like you do a lot of attacking, and then you save your arms for the bosses, and you rarely even get to like your full force gauge, so you can do the cool like high force moves.
Yeah, so like Wild Arms Twist is that force system, right? So it's like Final Fantasy's limit gauge, but it's like being repurposed as like a resource. Which on paper it's really cool and smart because it puts like basic attacking and defending into your flow of things. So I like how it feels like you're doing combos and you're like weighing the merits of doing like your basic toolkit. But the problem
so let's just quickly explain the system. You have a gauge which is called your force gauge, and when you take damage and when you do various kinds of moves, you gain force.
It's basically if you are using your regular attack or you take damage, you will gain force.
You gain a little bit from using other attacks as well, but not nearly as much as from regular attacks. You have one set of special moves where they unlock the higher your force is, but they don't consume force.
So you have abilities and you have original skills. Those are the delineation. The abilities, just like once your force revs up past a certain threshold, you can use them. And then original abilities are at 25, 50, 75, 100 force. You can consume that much force to do a thing.
Yeah. And so you are encouraged to, like Leroy was saying, use your basic attacks to build force. And then different characters work in different ways. So Lilka, who's a caster, her spells are her like abilities. So her spells don't consume points. She just needs to get to the threshold and then she's able to cast. If you want to use one of her original abilities, original skills, sorry, that's then going to shut off some of her more powerful spells until you've recharged your force. That's such a cool magic system.
Yeah, but like I think this also contributes to the feel of like Kamen Rider, and like because like in Toku fights they always have to like build up momentum in the fight before they can do all of their flashy shit. And like this is pacing for TV where they need to like have a cool fight and then they do the finishing move and they win or not if it's a recurring villain. But like this is. It's especially funny with Ashley, where he literally has to rev up to become his Kamen Rider form, and then he has to rev up a little again so he can use his cool lightsaber. But yeah, it's not a difficult system because the game is not mostly balanced like that. Yes, starting force is equal to character level, which is a really neat way to let you do stronger spells earlier. Eve says in chat. This is why Tim becomes very useful at like level 24, because first aid, basically the first skill he gets if you're playing the game reasonably,
shut up,
is an AoE heal that doesn't consume force but does like become available at 24 force points. So at level 24, which is like third of the way, halfway through the game, reasonable level to be at that point. So like you can open every fight that you want with AoE heals that have speed priority over everything for some fucking reason. It's really busted. And also it scales funny because Tim is a little beast. he's so good at healing and casting spells, but he has, and all the characters have different methods of obtaining power. Like the original, it's more diverse than the original game. Yeah, they do call it first aid because it goes first.
I guess the balancing problem I found was
no, go ahead.
Well, it's just based off like that first stage is pretty illustrative of it. Like the moves that take no resource ended up as good or technically better than the moves that take your resource. So in practice, you don't have to make a lot of these decisions, and so maybe like the harder fights. And the reason why those fights at the end are harder is because you have one party member. So the decisions you can make are much lower. You can't rely on first aid spam or something because you have to like figure out where to put your OP tools, which I guess is interesting. But like, so Tim has
the tactical choice of which party members to send to which parts of that final sequence ended up being really interesting for me because I hadn't learned how to use and I hadn't developed some of the characters. I had to figure out how I could make them work. I don't know the thing I was going to say. What was it?
But to finish my thought, Tim has like these guardians that are even bigger heals. He has huger and huger and huger heals, and these are the ones that actually cost a resource. I can never imagine a situation where you would, pop off with the big Odieric or his like, I don't remember, his love medium. I don't know what it's called, but it also does a
or something
heal.
like that.
Yeah. But like that takes all your force guards, and you can just hit first aid, and that'll heal everyone almost full.
Here's the fun part: if you high combine with Dandarum, it's a fucking 3 turns free for Tim. Like you just get to go 3 more times.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, I didn't even get to. There's a lot of
crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. There's a lot of systems in the game I didn't even check out because it doesn't. It just doesn't really create avenues for you to mess around with it.
Yeah.
It gets a bit long in the tooth, so you just start to use what works.
Yeah, and also it's pretty hard to play around on kind of ordinary enemies because they just die too quickly.
Yeah, I felt really anxious about like how long battles are going to take. So most enemies will die in one attack, which I think is unusual. Like, that's how the first 10 hours work in a game. But sorry, what are you going to say?
No, I was just going to say like really early on, like the prologue for all the characters, like there's a point where you'll level up to the point where you can just bop an enemy and they'll die, and then pretty much the rest of the game, except for rare enemies that have more HP and things you want to steal from them or learn from them, or have worthwhile drops. Like most enemies, if you're on level for a zone, are gonna die in like 1 turn.
Yeah,
I would say
of course you do.
I was just gonna say I imagine a critique of the first Wild Arms is the battles took too long, but this is like a super overcompensation.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with Wild Arms 1's combat taking too long, as I remember, was just the animations were. It was the start of attack animations getting really long.
Yeah.
And in this, the attack animations are still kind of long, actually. Not as excessive as they got with, like, I remember Grandia 2 has a bunch of unskippable attack animations that are really long. And Wild Arms 2 isn't that bad, but the attacks still take a while to play out. And it's just that you only have to do 1 attack per character per random encounter.
Yeah.
Although you can skip a lot of the encounters.
Yeah, the encounter skip is nice. Some places it like I think it could use more signposting with like what rules there are on like when you can and can't skip encounters, because some places just you don't get to. But I was also
a thing. So the way the encounter skip works is right before you get an encounter, your character will get a little exclamation mark speech bubble, and if you press the cancel button or basically any other button as well, you can cancel the encounter unless the speech bubble is red, which means it's unskippable. I developed such a reflex for pressing the button when I saw the pop-up that when I wanted to do some grinding late on, I kept accidentally pressing the button.
I mean, yeah, the other thing I would complain about is that like the encounter, like the victory pose doesn't end on its own. It just circles the camera around you until you press a button on it. It's just like
I kept forgetting that and just kind of leaving it to wait out the victory pose, and it didn't.
Yeah, no, it will literally just sit there as long as you let it.
FF12 does that too, by the way.
Yeah, but only on the big fucking battles, not every battle.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I think it's also, so we talked in the original episode about Wild Arms 1, about how Westerns are often, or like an older tradition of Westerns is like defending a place for whatever reason from whatever encroaching force. And that wasn't done very well in Wild Arms 1 because it always felt like you went to defend something and it went to shit, or you got there to defend it and it was already gone to shit. And I feel like this is still kind of going for that, but with a different like framing device, given that you're like a squad getting deployed to a bunch of places to like
you're like specifically rapid response, so it's expected that you are going to go into action once something is already occurring.
Yes,
there is very, very a tiny bit of like Wyatt Earp vibes. Like, I'm going to go out and get these outlaws. Odessa's the outlaws, but of course it's ratcheted up to like incomprehensible degrees.
Yeah. And also just like, I don't know, for all the complaints that I have about the things this game does, I really like it. Like I haven't replayed a whole lot of games that we've done for the podcast or around the podcast because just like I would rather diversify my experience than revisit stuff for game criticism's sake. But this is just
notwithstanding Kingdom Hearts, but
I mean, that's because I forced Doll into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's just like, this is a neat game. Rereading it will give you more sense of like how to process its weird jank localization and its mechanics.
Yeah.
And I felt like I generally got the plot when I was playing it originally, but I definitely felt like I got more out of it this time around.
I feel like part of it plot-wise also is that it depends what kind of stories you latch onto well. Like the kind of romance Ashley's like love story where you go back to his home village and check in with his girlfriend on the regular. That really worked for me, and I really liked that, and it really felt powerfully like Ashley had a place to go back to and to care about.
Yeah.
And there was some friction there. It wasn't just, oh, she's a perfect, sweet, like, homegirl. It was, she wants him around, and she's frustrated when he keeps making this choice to go and putting himself in danger.
And also, she feels very conflicted when she finds out the sort of monster that he is. But then eventually comes around to him like, this is Ashley. He needs your help, not to be scorned by you. And no, that entire like all of the I think I've said this elsewhere, but like not locking all the romance inside the party is good. Actually, not everything. Like it helps make the party feel like it's tied to the world and not just itself. Also, there hasn't been talking about heroes so far. This game This game has some funny takes on heroism.
I want to pause and just like talk about Lord Blazer, right? Because that's pretty important. I mean, it kind of, you just have to establish the context. And I guess there's like a mythos, right, where thousands of years ago the sword mages defeated the Lord Blazer. Here's a lot of proper nouns for you. And she beat him with the Argent Lamb. And the Argent Lamb is supposedly the power that gives you the power to be a hero, to be someone who could stop Lord Blazer. And it seems for a long time, it seems like the sword is like just like a magical source of power that transforms you into something that could basically just make you super powerful, defeat everything. But anyways, they kind of very early on in the game, they kind of draw a comparison to the sword mages and Ashley, and it seems like he could be the descendant of that hero. And he goes up to try to pull out the Argent Limb, which would transform him into the hero, and he is unable to do it. And then, in fact, he actually gets transformed into a monster. That's when he Kamen Riders out. He fuses with the Blaze of Disaster, which is the negative karma that will eventually destroy the whole world. And so something I think that's interesting, like that keeps like being referenced back, is that when Ashley does things that are called heroic by fiction, he gets closer and closer to that negative karma he's possessed by. He's like stacking up the negative karma. And then, and in fact, this even gets echoed by his relationship with Marina, where she starts to feel like she doesn't even recognize him anymore, and she feels like she's with a different person. And it seems to imply it's because it gets like bifurcated, right? Because it's either because he's possessed or it's because he's out like doing war shit and he's traumatized and he's becoming a different person, and they're kind of like layered on top of each other, and you get to compare and contrast it.
Mm-hmm.
That was just another way I thought it was a interesting way to develop both characters. They're both taken pretty seriously in the fiction, which is very rare.
Yeah. We're, and it's also like, so it turns to this, all of these different characters have, except for maybe Tim, but I guess Tim does too. All of these characters have a different idea of what a hero is.
Tim's interesting because he gets told what a hero is, and he has to like deal with that. Like he's kind of prescribed in the role. He is like a conventional type of hero.
He gets
not from his actions.
Yeah, he gets told to be a certain kind of hero, and then the kind of hero he's told he has to be is like that serves as a foil to all the characters who are like, I want to be a hero and do the heroic thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pretty cool.
I mean, I don't know that that a lot of the characters in the party are like, I want to be a hero.
Well, Canon does.
Well, Canon's all fucked up anyway. Canon's got so much trauma, and he's a fucking idiot. But
it's people. Those are people who are like really invested in that myth. Basically,
yes.
They're so invested in that myth.
The whole thing is like, this game is about what it means to be a hero, and what it thinks it means to be a hero is to be a sacrifice. And
yes, or at least it has an assumption that sacrifice is core to being a hero in some way.
Yes, I was going to bring up Hyoko, because the first arc is also somewhat concerned with this. In a way that mirrors, like, I watched Hyoko, which is a 2012 anime, while it was airing. Ish. And the first arc is about well, aside from introducing the characters, obviously, it's about one of the characters' uncles who has gone missing, and it's been 7 years since anyone saw him, so he's presumed dead. And they are trying to find out why he basically ended up like making one of the main characters cry when she was little, because she didn't retain the memory of what was going on in that conversation, and something he said made her just lose it. But it comes down to essentially like, he was I'm gonna spoil the first arc of Hyuka because I think it's a good show and that won't be ruined by this. It comes down to the fact that he was part of the student protests, and he was eventually made into a scapegoat for burning down a building that happened on accident because of a bonfire that was happening at one of the protests. And this is eventually uncovered because there's a letter from the year after that's just like, his heroic sacrifice will not be forgotten. And this translates really well across from Japanese to English, because heroic sacrifice does not and will not ever include whether the sacrifice consented to being made a sacrifice. And there is a thread to follow from that like, if someone is sacrificed against their will, but it accomplishes something that the group that sacrificed them wanted, they could be called a hero. And that's the thrust of what Wild Arms 2, I think, feels about the term hero. And a lot of the party ends up going, I want to make a world where we don't need heroes. Because
Wild Arms 2, the ones who walk away from Filgaia.
Yep, that's probably going to be that episode title.
Fair.
Because
honestly,
like,
though,
it's
I mean,
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I was just gonna say, like, there's a bunch of different threads tying around that central core idea, but like that's what the core of what the plot ends up being about is. And
yeah, that's what
despite
it.
despite the fact that they end up sacrificing someone to make it happen, just
That's what it comes. That's what it comes down to for sure. Actually, I really love that read because it Wild Arms 2 does take the Marcher like pretty seriously as something that isn't that maybe shouldn't happen, right? It's this excess that people rely on. But then, when you look at it, like when you try to imagine something alternative like you're doing in fantasy, you can go like, well, maybe we shouldn't need fucking martyrs at all. And
Mhm.
that is pretty good. What I was gonna say though is that I think I mean Wild Arms has a whole bunch of other types of heroes in it too, which I think is interesting because it still has it's stuff that happens in the past, right? It still has the mythological hero that I
Mhm.
already brought up, but it also has the war hero or the
Yeah.
hero that directly engages in that stuff, the
Mm.
political fights or whatever that,
Yeah.
and then it
And
has
it
the
has
hero.
like it
Oh
has
yeah,
a really
what?
complex engagement with war heroism and
Yeah, it
war
does.
crimes as well, which I have to admit I lost track of. Um, but I felt that it was I felt that it was trying something that was a really fertile thing to attempt for a video game.
No, you could go back and just read like kind of the reflection of the war context, and you'd get something conflicted. I actually think Wild Arms 2 doesn't go far enough, but you still get something really conflicted and interesting. And I'm not going to do it right now because it would just take over the whole cast. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's also ideas of just a hero as someone who's just the better than other people, and because they're better than other people, they have to protect them. But the
Mm.
game kind of sets up each one of these different heroes and then rejects it, rejects it, rejects it, rejects it. Of course,
Yeah.
but I think another interesting part for me, at least, I keep thinking about it is when Brad talks to Billy and Billy says, "You're my hero," right? So then
Mhm.
that's where I say like the concept of heroism is very um it's rooted in context, like a deep context in Wild Arms too. It comes up because of the situation these characters are in.
Mm.
But
Yeah. I think so. I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it. We want to save it for later because it's spoilery. But I made a joke earlier about the ending of Watchmen, and like obviously Watchmen is a deliberate, self-conscious attempt at deconstructing superhero comics. Um, and I think there's something similar in how Wild Arms 2 wraps up, with like Irving and the conception of heroism that might be at work in his motivations.
Mm.
yeah,
Um,
see, that's the problematic part because if you take Irving seriously, you take him at his word. Irving because Irving funded Odessa, and Odessa is this fascist terrorism cell. Irving's like this war or this flirtation with fascism has made you all strong enough to be able to weather this new crisis, and like so this
mm,
was necessary on your progression. And I'm actually the super genius, and my my global puppet stringing it was
Yeah.
important to
I
create these heroes. He's like I don't know, it's just he's like the DM or something.
yeah, like I think in this case it is I only processed this like a few minutes ago when I was talking about like the whole through line of heroism, sacrifice, and like consent is that like the difference between him and who people were trying to make Ashley or Brad or Tim or Lilka or Cannon out to be is that like Irving does like consent, and I think Alticia, it's implied that at least that Alticia would do anything for Irving.
I hope she
So
consented. You know what I mean?
yeah.
yeah.
I'm just like I think Irving I
Oh
think
no,
what
that
they
was an
were
incest joke, but
yeah, no,
sorry.
I'm aware.
Okay.
There is a wild moment of like surprise incest very late in this game.
I don't know if it's
Um,
surprise incest. I think it can be read as that, but I don't know if that like
It's framed the exact same way as the Ashley Marita sex scene. So at first I was like, yeah, maybe not. But then when the other one came up, I was like, oh shit.
yeah, like it is as unambiguous as I think the game's creators felt able to be.
I'm also
Um,
just like then they turned into fucking a monster. Like
yes.
so
True.
my entire point is like I think Alticia, as much as she could consent, did consent, as did Irving, to basically sacrifice themselves and the sword mage's bloodline to like give them give arms a chance to like put down the Kuiper belt and then deal with Lord Blazer eventually, but like that wasn't part of their plans, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely.
So like the whole thing with like heroism isn't heroism if it's just sacrificing somebody, but like if this person these pair have at least consented to being sacrificed so that they can make up for how much fucking crime they've done against humanity, which is a decision for a final boss.
Yeah, I guess another way to put it is that Irving is like really cognitive of this, and he's like because he's so obsessed with heroes, he knows what a hero should do, and then he's like, I'm super invested in heroes. We need heroes, and he's like the last person who's like, I have to do these things to be a hero. When everyone else in the game is like, we don't need heroes. Heroes.
Time to make another Mass Effect reference. It kind of feels like being Paragon enough to just tell the dude to kill himself in Mass Effect 1 and skip the final boss fight, but he turns into a boss anyway, so it's just like, yeah, you know better than this. Yes, I'm going to turn into the Kuiper belt now. Transformation noise.
I think that maybe like the qualms that Leroy was raising earlier about the kind of post-creditsy scene where they're kind of rehabilitating Irving in a way. I think that the idea that Irving is kind of, you know, we need mythological heroes, which I think is true actually. Like it is a human psychological thing to look for particular kind of narrative structures in life, and kind of narrative mythic structures in life. You know, Irving and some of the other characters are clearly over-invested in that. As it has to be said, a lot of 20th century mass media is because of Joseph Campbell. But like, you could maybe see that scene of like them kind of, because all the characters get back together and Ashley and Marina have twin children, and they're kind of rehabilitating Irving's legacy. And it is a bit weird, but if you think of it in the context of, well, these are the characters who rejected sacrifice, but they recognize that Irving's sacrifice is part of what enabled them to be there, not accepting sacrifice.
Yeah, that was kind of me processing that over the last few minutes. I was just like, yeah, it is kind of weird to rehabilitate Irving, but I didn't scan it as something that was weird, and I guess that was because like eventually Irving, quote unquote, earned his rehabilitation by fucking sacrificing himself to earn it.
I just want to say, see how fucking complex this game is? It's actually good.
Yes.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I wanted to make a finer distinction than that as well, and it's just slipped away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I just want to be like, I love this game.
Yeah, this game is pretty good. I'll probably replay this in another fucking few years. Or I'll replay it like next year and make a bunch of fucking guides that are better than the ones online. Please, God!
Well, I can see myself replaying it if and when this fan re-CL comes out, definitely. And like, yeah, I still can't really work out why I found it why it was so hard to sit down to play it, because it's in manageable chunks and it's pacey because the combat's always short, and the core gameplay loop is satisfying because it's, you know, even from early on, you're doing a lot of big damage hits. It doesn't ever feel like you're kind of plunking away at something and desperately trying to survive.
And then by the end of the game, you can do like 20,000 to a thing. It's just like,
yeah.
Cool.
it's attractive. It's sounds good. The environments are interesting. You know, like it's pretty good for having dungeon puzzles that feel substantive without being obnoxious. I struggled to solve some of them, but like I don't think it was really a problem with the puzzles. I think it was just me being dumb and busy. But it was, you know, every ingredient of this game was good, and actually sitting down at the table to like eat the resulting dish was intimidating for some reason.
I'll say from my personal taste, the one thing I struggled with for a long time getting over was I think the complete lack of resource management made the dungeons kind of a slog for me. It came to so sometimes, in my opinion, this felt like a parody of what people say turn-based games are like, where it's like every single battle interrupts the stuff that's fun, and I didn't want to do the battles, and it would kind of get me off track on the puzzles, and sometimes I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's like that's all I'm trying to say, I guess.
The thing that I would probably say is like, okay, so Wild Arms 2 is a field with a bunch of stuff in it. If you come in here and you're like, okay, I want to go across this field because there's something on the other side that I want to get to, and you have to walk across the field and you're not in the mood for walking, it's going to be annoying to go to the other side of the field. And that is this game for like the first third of it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah,
it holds on to so much of its complexity that you're not sure where this episodic narrative is going.
Yeah, it needs. Yeah. It really could have used like a. I don't know. Honestly, this could be something that could have been fixed with a good localization that could have like delivered something more sinister as a hook earlier on in one of the episodes, where like, okay, Odessa is like actually a threat, or there are things going on besides Odessa that like are ominous, but we'll probably get to later. But like, it really feels like early on you're just kind of running around looking for the cutscenes, and enemies are in the way sometimes, which is probably my least favorite genre of JRPG.
Yeah, it is. Like, there are some JRPGs that specifically the puzzle rooms won't have encounters. And then, you know, some rooms are puzzle rooms and some rooms are more kind of maze rooms that are just like, you have to make your way through this room, and it's designed so that you take long enough going through the room that you get a certain number of encounters. And I think I prefer that. Like Leroy said, it's easy to lose the thread of a puzzle, even with a very short, non-thinky battle in the middle. And like, for a lot of the game, it's not even. So I was using Ashley and Brad and Lilka most of the game, and Ashley and Brad are physical attackers, and their basic physical attack is usually enough to kill one opposing enemy, and there are usually 3 opposing enemies. You would think that Lilka, being a healer, would at least have to cast a damage spell or something that requires a little bit of extra menuing to kill enemies. Often she doesn't. She can just bop them with her staff and get a one-shot. Especially in the early game. And it's like, you know, when combat is enough, even when it's literally just mashing attack for everyone to disrupt the thread of the puzzle in your head, something isn't quite right about how it's been tuned.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. Like, either like you use the encounters as a pacing tool and they mean something for your resources, and you might need to leave a dungeon before you like actually finish it because you're like, okay, I'm getting kind of slapped around by these encounters, or like just skip the encounters, especially if in a puzzle room where just like, yeah, you didn't need to do this. You know better. This is 1999. You could have done better than this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the encounters are skippable with a button prompt.
I mean, skip putting encounters in the room, not make me press a button to potentially skip an encounter. But not always.
Although I liked the... Oh, were you going to explain something?
I just want to check something because I looked for this and I couldn't find it, but I might just not have looked thoroughly enough. Is it possible to cast healing magic out of battle at all?
Nope.
Yes. So just to throw in on the like resource management front, what that means is if you aren't organized about, or if your party construction doesn't favor doing your healing in battle, you are going to be using healing items out of battle to like get ready for boss fights and stuff. And you can't, until like right at the end of the game, there is no shop that's available that stocks the basic HP healing items. Which, there are games where that would be a huge transformation in the play experience. In this, because healing magic is so cheap, you have to be playing poorly and not making use of Tim for that to be a problem.
You would know about that, wouldn't you?
I feel like the risky thing or the problem thing here for me is that the consequences of the battles you do not carry over to the overworld usually. Like I wasn't taking any damage. I never really had to think or manage the state very much at all. And even games that are like on the easier side, like okay, we just keep saying Final Fantasy again. You still have to do something. You still have to keep something afloat. You have to juggle at very low intensity intervals. In Wild Arms 2, you juggle nothing.
Once enemies start hitting you with statuses, it's a bit different because all statuses persist between battles.
Yeah, true.
But the status, you can buy status healing items and those are cheap and you can use them out of battle, so it's not a huge problem.
Yeah, the Diablo pillars have actual threats in them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, there are dungeons with environmental hazards that do serious damage. It's not like ticking for 10 damage a time. It's like they will chunk you.
It is 100 every single time, no matter what. So here's my strat. Heal status is out of battle. Get into a battle. Tim first aid immediately, and you will be fine. This is my healing strat for the entire game, and it worked.
And I was gonna say, as much as I liked the skippable battles at first, like with the so the way it works is an exclamation mark will pop above your head, and then you can press circle to confirm. We've talked about it without talking about it. Like I started getting a ton of red ones, and then the consequences, I got more pissed off because, like normally in an RNG random battle game, it's it's just gonna happen. It's a fixed thing that's just gonna happen, and you make your peace with it. But since this added a second RNG layer, when the random battle was unskippable, I got more pissed off than just a normal random battle. You know what I mean? Because I lost the fucking roll, and I would lose and lose and lose and lose them, and just be like, ah.
It is funny how there's this long-standing assumption of games culture that players want agency and they want reasons to push buttons. And it turns out that actually a lot of the time, if you take something that was random and make it responsive to a player pressing a button, it's only a net negative because what it introduces is instances of the player feeling like they failed rather than instances of the player, replacing instances of just a thing that's part of the game happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely introduces more possible fault lines, right?
Yeah, there are more points of you, the player, being the failure instead of just RNG not going your way, which is not the greatest thing to have psychologically for players. Unless you want to fuck with them like that, which is fine. But I don't think this game did.
As with any game design technique, you can absolutely do it, and there might be uses for it, but it is going to make you unpopular.
Yep.
And sometimes it's the right thing for a piece of art to make its creator unpopular with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
But
they're later entries in Wild Arms do have systems to limit the stuff.
But, interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like they iterate among things. Crazy, huh?
Thinks about some other games companies that we know of that definitely don't.
Yeah, and I could definitely see like the more experimental parts in Wild Arms 2 getting iterated on and tightened because they at the very least, like most stuff in this game you won't see in other series, JRPG series or games.
Yeah, and like I realized at one point that I kind of want to make an RPG that is like a mix of Golden Sun and this, and then I would just like, oh, I guess I want to make a Kamen Rider system. But whoops, because I really do like the Force Gauge. It's a really cool mechanic, but like this game is not balanced for how good it is most of the time.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, go for it. Make the game.
No.
Like,
how dare.
I can't. A Toku RPG, I'm sure, would do numbers with many of our friends.
Yeah, I think that would just pop off. That's not being like, that's a niche that's not being served,
Actually, to be fair, I have also said, you remember when we did Exist Archive, and I love, and I loved the like Toku character in that, and I wanted to make a game of her.
I don't remember Exist Archive. Shut the fuck up, doll. I'm gonna ban you. Also, yes, there is a picture that may be understood to be Vash the Stampede in Marina's room.
Amazing.
Anyway, let's talk about Becky getting latched. And
oh yeah, so
Doll asked earlier, was this better or worse than getting robbed in Netopia last year?
Yeah, so what happened, I got through the final dungeon, which is the longest dungeon in the game, as it should be, and is really kind of two already chunky by this game's standards dungeons back to back. And you get to you get to a point where it's like, okay, you have to send 3 of your party members individually to fight 3 like pre-boss, mini-boss fights, and then the remaining 3 party members will go to the final boss. It's not actually the final boss, but it might as well be. I didn't have 3 party members that I thought I could both spare from the final encounter and
that
would be able that could solo the routes. I could have backtracked and gone away and done some more building and got some more moves to these characters and powered them up and so on, and come back, and it would have been fine. It would have been a lot of work. It would have been a lot of playtime. It probably would have been like 6 hours of extra playtime.
That's crazy, because I could have gotten out and gotten stuff started in like 1.
How many hours did you have, Becky? We're gonna name and shame.
Yep.
Hang on a second. Let me pull the file up.
Do you know yours, Val?
My file is 3209.
I had 50.
Hang on.
Do I win?
Probably.
I am not sure.
Did you save your extra file?
I did save my extra file, but then DuckStation has that like load save state that you made when you closed it last, and that took me to the wrong place. So it would have taken me ages to get to the load menu.
That's
turn that option off. It's bad.
It's a really useful option.
No.
I remembered mine because it was a round number. And I have to blame some of that on trying to get Maribel's skills. That was a waste of time.
Yeah, like Maribel's a blue mage type. She learns skills from enemies.
I straight up spent 4 hours getting stuff for the final dungeon, and I did so very inefficiently. So I could have been under 30.
Come on. So the last save I have here is at 48 hours 21.
So probably similar to my time.
Wow,
yeah.
That's crazy. Y'all are slow.
Okay, but I played the game without a guide, and I think Becky did too for a lot of the time.
So I only used a guide when I got stuck on something, which was sometimes, I couldn't find the place that I'd been sent to go to, and was sometimes just missing things about puzzle solutions. Some of which were some of which were just me forgetting an interaction or an ability. Some of which were genuinely like, oh, I had to think one step further than I'm used to having to think for like dungeon puzzles in an RPG.
Yeah, these are like survival horror puzzles. They're actually a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
Besides the ones that were word puzzles, I thought they're pretty good, but I also got stuck on them.
For the
And
record, I ended up using a walkthrough for like the second disc, but I mostly just like looked at the table of contents and like looked at all the optional stuff that popped up and was like, okay, there's stuff I can do now. I'll go find that.
Fair enough. It was a replay,
yeah.
but then I have no excuse.
To give you an example of a situation where my playtime got vastly unnecessarily expanded by me missing something, in the prison dungeon right near the start, I didn't realize that once you had the key, it expected you to go into the items menu and use the key as an item while standing next to the door.
It took a long time on that too.
Open the cell door, and I walked the entire length of the level twice.
Me too.
Jesus.
Normally, when you have the key in your inventory and you go to the locked door, and you press the action button on the door, that opens the door. Like, I don't think that was an
yes, but also the key is usable in your inventory.
It's like an adventure game. It's literally like an item puzzle thing, but it did not occur to me at first.
Yeah, no, like I sorted my inventory and like it was like, oh, that key is usable. I will probably need to use that on the door.
Not everyone's a game whisperer. They just run around.
Sorry, I'm just too much of a gamer. What I
feel deeply validated by the fact that Leroy also had this problem.
I stand alone, hero sacrifice gamer.
That could also be the episode title.
No! God. It's so bad. Yeah, no, like, I don't know. My brain just works different. I am built stupid and, yeah, also, good. I'm glad they translated Booty Call as Treasure Radar, because that's what it should be.
Booty Call is so good, though.
Oh, God. Oh, also, Wild Arms 3 walled me because there's a bit where you have to clean off a piece of, like, a window so that light shines on the thing, and the only tool that will interact with the window is a freezing laser beam. I don't know why. It just...
Wild Arms 3 sounds cool as fuck.
It's pretty neat. I got bored of it, like, 2/3 of the way through, originally.
Oh, dang.
Do not use the booty call for evil deeds.
Ashley would never.
Ashley would never. He only has eyes for Marina. Anyway.
To provide context, the booty call is an item in-game that Ashley gets as a tool, which is... The tools are basically exploration and puzzle-solving items, and each character gets 3 of them eventually. Ashley gets this thing called the booty call, which is, as Eve says, it's a treasure radar. You press it, and it reveals hidden treasures in the environment. And it is plot critical for something. I forget what. Something in the early game you have to have the booty call in order to be able to find.
Oh, the booty call helps you find the bombs in that room, I think? Maybe.
Yeah.
Not.
I mean, so. Yeah, there are a lot of people just like talking about, oh, wow, that guy left his bombs in the hotel room. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But then, like, yeah, it helps you find a lot of stuff. But yeah, it's called Booty Call. Good.
Booty Call's a good place to end on, maybe?
Yeah. Do we have any more questions from the peanut gallery?
Yeah, anyone any more questions? Have we sufficiently satisfactorily addressed the topic of heroism, Eve?
To be fair, also to Doll, Becky didn't get properly latched in this. She was just lazy.
Yeah. I was soft latched, whereas in Netopia, I was pretty much hard latched because there isn't a way back. You just have to tough out the grinding.
Yep.
Like getting, part of the reason Dolly's picking on me over this is because I recently played Undertale and I got latched in Undertale as well. And that's just because I'm bad at bullet hell stuff. Like,
No
I'm
worries,
really
Macro.
bad at bullet hell stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the challenge you picked up when you ended up starting Undertale. Was that thread hanging over your head?
Yeah, if I'm going to play a bullet hell game, it might as well be that one. And I've played it now, and I don't have to play it again, so I probably won't. It was great. It's a wonderful game, but
maybe now you'll retain all the things that you've. That was a terrible thing to quote me on.
Yep. Yes,
sake.
it was.
Anyway.
Oh, right. There is a character in the game called Becky. Can we briefly mention how many characters this game lets you name?
It's crazy.
It's so weird. Why does it let you name NPCs who are never members of the party?
Because they're important to the story.
Yeah, like the Lilka's, like the boy in Lilka's like backstory, Terry. I will admit that he made such a bad first impression that I named him Terry Bull.
Jesus. I mean,
I named Lilka Lexi because I thought I was going to do a bit where I named all the characters after us, but then I didn't.
Yeah, you have mentioned that, Eve. There is a Wild Arms 3 item named the name card that lets you rename any NPC you can speak to.
Hey!
Name tag. Because you can. It's not voiced. The freedom. I named the dog June for reasons that are only relevant to Becky. There it is.
Fair enough.
And I heard there's the vampire named Maribel. I renamed him Maribel because her name is Mariabelle in the original Japanese, and Maribel just flows better.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could
rename your spells.
Yeah.
Which, again, this is a Wild Arms thing. I got tripped up again by the fact that the stats all have different names. So Res, which I would have assumed was resistance and therefore probably magic resistance, is actually response, i.e.
responsiveness.
Speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, also you can rename your spells because you can.
Yeah. Most of the spells I renamed to their Final Fantasy names just because I knew that way I'd remember what they were.
I left most of them alone except for the revives and the non-elemental one. Because I renamed the low level revive oh no, and the high revive oh dear. And then I named, there's an item called a Crest S, which is like magic crest that gives one spell 1.5 times damage, and then I was like, oh, S. I'm gonna put this on Saber, which is the non-elemental attack spell for Lilka, and I'm going to call it Cool S because let's go. That was fun.
That is fun, but also you're such a dork.
Yep, your dork.
I want to shout out the NPC rating of the game. Actually, this game loves the NPC talkers. It's for all the NPC talkers out there. Yeah. Because every time you bounce back to the home base, every single NPC in the world that you have access to, they'll get new dialogue.
A very Trails maneuver.
Yeah, it's like what Falcom does. And I mean, even if you don't check out all the stuff in the world, because I didn't, because who has time for that? At the very least, you could go check on all the workers at the Valeria Chateau. And the workers will just like shoot the shit with the characters, or they'll all have their own reflection on the new ongoing crisis, and I thought it was just neat.
Yeah, also neat in that context is the fact that often you have to do, like, if you're not using a guide, the game expects you to talk to a bunch of NPCs who will give you directions to where you're going next. If you're going to somewhere that's not well known, they're like, say, hey, go to that town and ask because it's near there, but we don't know where. And you go to the town and then you have to talk to a bunch of NPCs to get the directions.
There's also a bit early on where you have to like buy the most expensive thing at the bar to find out about like a location if you want to get to the odd headquarters, I think.
Yeah.
Which is just like, that's cool. That's cute.
I really love how the game will like reuse locations, and it's like own geography too. You keep coming back to places, and then it's a good chance to talk to the NPCs.
And the world, unlike the first one where they were really trying to make the world feel big, it didn't feel like they were, because of how you get around, which is mostly teleports.
Yeah.
It's just like, it doesn't feel as big as it actually is.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you stay at a specific in, I think it's 4 times, they'll tell you about a bonus dungeon that literally won't show up on the map until that happens.
Yeah. So regarding the world feeling big, I think the world does feel big. It doesn't feel big in a way that is obnoxious or unmanageable. If you are going to go from one place to another walking or in a vehicle, then it feels big because the vehicles aren't super fast.
I mean,
and so like it gives some, like, every time I decided to go kind of and use the wraparound on the map, I was surprised by how long it took, how far it was from whatever shore I was on to the edge of the map.
Yeah,
and
it's not an Ether 8 network though, doll. It's like they have like 6 points on the map that you can actually access, and you have to go to specific teleport locations to like use the things there. It's like they basically are bridging different like landlocked or like lockdown continents, and there's a gap. So like you get a hovercraft, and that functions as a, yeah, it also does play a second animation every time you use the live reflector. But like you get a hovercraft, and there's an inner sea, because it turns out the entire world is like a ring that like traps, like separates the outer sea from the inner sea. And until you get an upgrade to the hovercraft, you can only use the hovercraft to go around in the inner sea until you get this thing that like teleports the hovercraft to the nearest location that you teleported to, which then like places it on the nearest beach, which is sometimes on the outer sea, and then you can use that.
I think the game does actually a really good job of like increasing, the legibility of the world, I guess. So it feels bigger and bigger, but at first it feels very small and local, and then you get more and more context as you play the game. It's like,
so there's the resonance there, but it's also just fun progression too, from a gameplay standpoint.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where like you're running around like small chunks of continents instead of having to like cross entire vast plains full of nothing but random encounters you can skip every time you want to go to the next point, because it's just like, okay, we're gonna teleport to Civil Land, ask them if it's cool to work here, deal with Odessa in the next town over from the castle, come back. Like, it's all broken up into really short distances, so unless you need to go somewhere completely new that is like branching off of one of your already traveled branches, it's pretty like manageable each leg of the journey.
Yeah.
And also, I managed to learn to like navigate around the fucking world, which is crazy. I'm not great with directions a lot of the time. But yeah, it's
well,
fun.
Also in some places this game has like cursed video game shapes to make it hard to follow directions.
Yeah, a little bit. And
I
also
think the world map's pretty distinctive, though. It's nice.
Yeah. And it does also give you a compass, which helps.
There is a
North Pole.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't need it. And then I got lost.
Yep. You fucking played yourself. But yeah, no, like it's an option that is on by default, that there is always like a north pointing compass on your screen, and it's useful, except for the part where for some reason the guide that I was using for like some of the later dungeons was like, oh yeah, so we're gonna rotate this entire map so north is not up for no good reason. And it's just like, bro, what the fuck did you think north is on a map? This is not helpful.
I had that problem a couple times using the same guide. It's like, go east, and I go east, and it wasn't east. I'm just like, what east? Which east did you mean?
Yeah. It's just like, so turn your camera to face east, and we're gonna go east. And I'm like, that doesn't work the way you think it works, buddy. Because he meant right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is why I want a better guide. I like getting people into this game would be easier if there was a consistent and accurate guide. Lordy me. Anyway, I think that's good for now. Anyone else got some questions or comments they want to bring up before we head out?
What are we playing next, Valerie?
We're playing Mother 3. It's not legally available in English, so you'll have to download the patch and patch your totally legitimate copy of Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance and play it on your totally legitimate Game Boy Advance that will run patched ROMs. And yeah, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pretend like emulate it. There are websites to get you what you need. Yeah, don't forget the high quality audio mixing patch. It it may or may not be found in a vault owned by a man. Yeah, it's out there. But yeah,
and that'll be sometime in July, probably.
Sometime in July or early August, depending on. We've been going every other month or so. But like, we're really not trying to keep a harsh schedule, so we'll get to it when it happens. Also, yeah, thanks for joining us for 1 year of Live Genre Chronicles. You can find our discussions and announcements in that Discord if you're not already in there. Everyone's welcome as long as you're not a dickbag. But if you're here listening to us talk about Wild Arms 2 for an hour and a half, 2 hours, yeah, it's crazy how Eve joined us because of Sonic Chronicles of all things, and now she's a part of the community. It's good stuff. But yeah, that's gonna be all for today. Thanks for coming by. I'll be back to VTubing soon enough, but as far as me as a podcaster goes, see you around.
Tomorrow or Tuesday, we'll be doing some more randomized Zelda.
Yep. But yeah, until next time, have a good evening, everyone.